So hello and welcome to today's webinar. We are the Equal Group and today's session is unfortunately, the last in our series of Black Futures events. It's been an amazing month. This is the fourth webinar, so we've had 3 so far. Really looking forward to today's conversation about social media and the way that it is used, can be used by Black communities. And I'm really pleased to have alongside me today, Tru Powell and Brianna O'Reilly. I will ask them both to introduce themselves shortly. But essentially, this conversation is really focused on social media and the way that we use it. I think the last couple of years, especially, we've seen a rise in kind of racism on social media, as well as homophobia, cultural appropriation. We do acknowledge that there are pros and cons to social media, especially in relation to social justice, galvanizing communities in positive ways, but that's notwithstanding some of the negativity that is often kind of prevalent on platforms. And with the increase in social media platforms, the increase in people's presence and visibility, it's really important to have a conversation around how social media is used, how it can be a force for good, as well as understanding and acknowledging the areas where social media platforms can do better to protect Black people and generally improve the experience that we will have when using or engaging with these platforms. So, having said that, we will dive into this conversation. I'm hoping that it'll be a really free-flowing conversation between Tru, Brianna, and I. Do feel free to raise any questions. Please make full use of the chat function. I will reserve some time later on in this session for you to specifically ask your questions to Tru and Brianna. Also, just wanted to acknowledge that Tru and I are wearing identical jumpers because that's the dress code apparently for us. But yeah, starting at the top, I will invite you both to introduce yourselves, but I'd also like you to, in your introduction, reflect on what does social media mean to you in the way that you live your lives and or do business. So I'll start with you, Brianna.
Hi, so my name's Brianna and I run a platform called The Black Project. Started it 2 and a bit years ago. And yeah, it's kind of grown into its own official media company. It's an accredited media company, and it focuses on celebrating the voices of the underrepresented with a specific focus on Black Britain and the wider diaspora. Social media for me was a lifeline. I have multiple chronic illnesses, which meant I wasn't able to work in a traditional sense, but social media gave me a platform to create a workspace for myself and create a career path for myself and opportunities that I wouldn't have ordinarily had without social media. However, I don't tend to use it personally. I have my own personal Instagram. I'll occasionally use it. Twitter, I would not touch with a 10-foot pole for my business because there's just very few ways of moderating it, and it can be accessible. So I'm very much thankful for it in a personal sense in terms of giving me a professional life, but it's not for me personally. What about you?
True.
Good afternoon all, and firstly thank you for having me on this webinar. I really appreciate it. I'm Tru Powell and I am a multi-award winning entrepreneur and a personal branding coach and strategist. So I run several different businesses across the region, one being a social enterprise for performing arts for young people, primarily from disadvantaged backgrounds. The second is a coaching and consultancy business. So I work with the next generation of entrepreneurs to build their personal brand, to get them visible, get them in the public eye, and to build their publicity and build strategy and context around that. And then the last business that I do is I run an awards ceremony, and where we recognise and platform and champion unsung heroes in business and in the community. And then I do various other things within the city in terms of sitting on different boards and navigating certain conversations, as well as probably, which is probably most convenient for this conversation, is doing lots of media work and doing lots of media commentating on TV and so forth. And I guess what that does in the sense of this conversation is it makes me hyper visible, and it makes me subject to trolls and subject to some of the darker side of social media. But in saying that, you know, I enjoy social media. I really like the world of social media. I think it's really helped propel my career. I think it's really helped making me visible. I think it's really helped my network and making me connect with people on a much more deeper level than going to networking events and doing the traditional type of networking. I think it's helped really expand my thinking and my thought process and knowledge and so forth. And it's really helped just in terms of building my publicity and building, you know, getting into the press. And I don't know, Brianna says she won't touch Twitter, but that Twitter's my baby. Twitter is the place I live, and that's just because of it's where the press live, and where all the journalists live, and I need to be on Twitter for my clients and also for myself. So I'm really thankful for social media. I'm very much on there as a personal brand. I'm an advocate that everybody should be on there for your personal brand. And yeah, I think that's me.
Amazing. Conscious that I didn't necessarily introduce myself. So my name is Matt Alonge. I'm the CEO of the Equal Group. We are the hosts on today's webinar. And I guess from my perspective, I have kind of a love-hate relationship with social media. It's absolutely necessary for what we do and increasing our reach and impact in the communities that we work in. But also acknowledge what has previously been said in terms of the tendency for these spaces sometimes to be a little bit toxic. And I wanted to go back to you, Tru, in terms of that dynamic around the negativity that sometimes does kind of come across on these platforms. And you mentioned kind of you being hyper visible. What impact does that have on kind of your approach or the feelings that you carry into these spaces?
You know what, I think that's a really good question. And, you know, I'm going to first off kind of address it by one of the things that I hate is when people say, I don't care what people say about me and I don't care. It's all lies. You know, nobody likes seeing anything bad about them, whether it's from trolls, whether it's on social media, whether it's on, you know, so they hear somebody speaking about, like, nobody likes it. And I think firstly, we need to be honest with ourselves, because I was that person before that, like, I don't care what people say about me, blah, blah, blah. But then when I see something, I'm like, oh, how could they say that? But it's and I've had to firstly come to that realization, and then once I came to that realization and once I came to that understanding that actually I do care what people say, I've had to then manage how I manage social media and how I respond to certain things. So if I, for example, go on TV and I'm doing a major conversation about race, for example, and it, you know, it's going, you know, people record it and they're putting it all over social media and it's going viral and the clip's being shared, I would not be on social media that day. I would, and probably for the next 48 hours, I would like shut down all my social media channels and not look and not be tempted to look, because you might see 100 great comments, but then you might see that one comment that just really cuts the core, and you're like, oh. So I would, whilst it's, you know, whilst it's hot and whilst it's all happening, then I just wouldn't go on social media that day. And I actually take practical steps about, you know, how I manage my social media. So just in terms of what I said on the top of the conversation about, you know, being inspired and being motivated, it's all about the people who I follow. And, you know, I don't follow foolery. I don't follow people who are going to share, you know, bad stuff or not on this kind of motivating, you know, tip. I always follow and have notifications of a great it's quotes for a day. I think it's called, and I put my notifications on. So every time they post a quote on there, like I'm get notified, and it's a positive, motivating quote to start my day. So it really is about taking practical steps about choosing who to follow and choosing when and when not to access social media channels. I hate it, absolutely hate it when people share black trauma and stuff, and I know we'll probably get into that. And I go so far as blocking them if I see it on my timeline and I'm like, oh, I don't like that. You know, I love blocking at the moment, and I think everybody should use it more often. It is our friend, and we need to utilize it. And you know, people DM me with some crazy stuff about, oh, this has happened in the news. Are you not going to say something? No, I'm not going to say something about that. But what I'm going to do is block you, and I just block them because I don't need that type of energy. And I think it's not necessarily social media that's bad. It's how we manage social media and who we choose to follow and how we choose to use social media and what we tend to share and what we tend to access. It's never the platform, it's the usage of it. And I think we need to start to separate the two.
Yeah, absolutely. Brianna, sorry.
Oh no,
Any thoughts?
itch. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with what you're saying, Tru. I feel that very strongly. I think for a long time when I started the Black Project, I didn't put my face to it because even being a faceless brand, if I posted things that certain demographics didn't want to see, I would get death threats, threats of violence, threats of rape, threats of whatever to my DMs. And that's without even having a face to it. They're sending that to a faceless organization. I didn't want that kind of hyper visibility that you've spoken about. As it started growing, I would get requests to talk about things on kind of more local news channels and then national. And I said no, because I just did not want to subject me as a person to that. I felt like I could separate the two if it was being sent to the platform. I didn't know that I could separate it if it was being sent directly to me. And I think that's kind of a thing that does still, even now, like coming on and doing this, it is something that does still give me like anxiety about it. Because like you say, we do care. Like, and even if you can go, you know, well, they're faceless accounts on the internet. It's like, well, yeah, but there is someone behind that, and that is still a real human being that took time out of their day to tell me that they want me dead because I advocated for Black lives. And that's like a heavy burden to carry. And I think it takes a long time to get to a place where you're like, do you know what? I can handle this. I can carry that weight. It's a lot to carry. And I do think the social media channels don't do enough to kind of curb it. I looked yesterday because I knew I was coming on here, some of the things that I'd reported over the years to see had Instagram responded to them. I've got things in there from April 2021 that Instagram still haven't even looked at. So those comments are still up. They're still out there for anyone to see. And they are like violently racist comments. So yeah, I think if you want to build a personal brand, you do definitely have to be on Twitter like Tru is. You definitely need to have your face out there. I think I was very conscious. I didn't want to be the brand because I don't think I'm built to carry that right now.
And you know, I think that's such an interesting point, and it all goes back to self-awareness, right? Like understanding what you cannot carry and what your mental capacity can cope with. And if you know that your mental capacity can't cope with that level of vitriol, scrutiny, condemnation, you know, if you know that you can't cope with all of that stuff, then of course, you know, keep yourself out of it so you can protect yourself. And I'm saying that to say, even though you do that, it doesn't stop, because people still find a way to send to your company page and stuff, and it still hits you because you still treat it as though it's, you know, they're speaking directly to you, even though they don't know who's behind the page. So it really is about the practical steps as well. And I know the Instagram and Meta and stuff are doing these. They've got like the screening things now where you can put filters in and put certain words in and stuff. So the first thing that I did was in my kind of profile was I put the N word in there to filter out, so no one can DM me anything that's got the N word in there, and that's all types of spellings of the N word. I've got filtered some of the other words, some of the swearing words and stuff like that. So no matter what, you can't DM me anything that contains certain triggering words for me. And it's so important, just a practical tip, like write down all your triggering words that will trigger you and that you would never want to have in any kind of conversation, and put them as a filter for your Instagram. So no one can send you anything that contains those words.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really important point, both in terms of what people can do individually to protect themselves, to guard themselves, to ensure that social media is a safe environment for them. And then so you just touched on some of the capabilities and functions that are built into these platforms that allow us to attempt to make our experience a little bit more inclusive, accessible, and just generally nicer. Brianna, I guess what's your perspective around what companies are doing, what they could be doing, kind of I guess over the last 2 years, we've seen a lot around kind of Black Lives Matter, the Euros, and all of the toxic messaging that came off the back of that. What role do you think kind of algorithms and content moderators play in allowing for a better experience for Black communities?
So me and the algorithm are not friends. We are constantly in battle with each other. So yeah, you mentioned the Euros there. I specifically remember putting up a post around the Euros. Just to touch on what Tru said, he doesn't like seeing Black trauma. Totally get it. I don't either. But as a news outlet, you kind of have to, which is a shame, but try and do it in a sensitive way as you possibly can, because it is still news. And I remember posting about the absolute torrent of abuse that got thrown at the Black players on the England squad after that final match. My post calling it out got flagged. All the comments that I was flagging didn't get flagged. They were still up 24 hours, 48 hours later. There was also a period where if you tried to hashtag BLM, if you tried to hashtag George Floyd, if you tried to hashtag Black Lives Matter, your post wouldn't get seen. It would get shadow banned. It would not get put on people's timelines. I do a feature called White Boy of the Week because the algorithm loves white faces, and it very specifically loves the faces of white men. So when my posts are not getting seen because they've got Black faces on them or because they're about Black stories, I'll put up a picture of David Tennant, Richard Madden, some famous white boy, and that will get thousands and thousands and thousands of interactions. Every single time it will be seen by upwards of 100,000 accounts, where some of my regular content about Black faces and Black lives and Black stories get maybe half of that. And it's just a way of kind of playing the system at its own game. And I think that's something you have to get good at if you're trying to build a brand on these platforms, because they're built by people that don't think about us, whether that's intentional or whether that's just a case of they're not thinking about these things when they're building the coding. I don't know, I can't say, but they don't think about us. And you have to get very good at figuring out how to play that system at its own game. And I think content moderators and the people that create these algorithms have to start listening to creators when they're saying, why am I not being seen for using these tags? Why am I not being seen when I put a picture of a Black face, but if I put a picture of a white face, everyone's seeing it? Like, it has to be an engagement between those at the top and the creators that are, they're what make the platform run. There's no platform without the people using it. And if the people using it are saying, hey, for some reason you don't like my existence and tags around my existence, there has to be an engagement back and forth.
And have you seen kind of instances of that positive engagement? I think you mentioned previously that you'd flagged issues and reported issues time and time again, and action wasn't taken. And have there been any instances where action has been taken, and that, you know, there's kind of green shoots in terms of what these platforms are trying to do?
Yeah, definitely. So for a while, when I first started the platform, I had it so that anyone that wanted to comment could comment, and that was just a minefield. However, when there was kind of violence in the comments, instantly, like, Meta would take that down straight away. Like, if it was extremely violent and it was clearly, obviously a dangerous thing to be posting, that would be gone. Thankfully, there is a feature that you can use where only people that have followed your account for a certain period are able to comment on your posts, which is how I have it set now, that if you want to engage with the posts, you have to engage with the platform, which, you know, it's a weird one, because essentially you're cutting off engagement by doing that, and you're having to choose between, do I have just like the biggest amount of engagement that I could possibly have and open myself up to an onslaught of hideous comments, or do I potentially limit the growth of the company and make it grow slower by saying you have to have been following for, I think it's like 2 weeks before you can comment, but also protect not just myself, because this is a platform for the Black community. This is a platform for Black people to come and be seen, to see their news, to see both positive and negative. It's very important to me that I hyper focus on the positive in the Black community. This was a safe space for Black people. It's very important then that I make sure that not just me, but they are not subjected to that torrent of abuse when they come and click on my posts and they see the comments. So even that's a thing of, like, having to choose between your own growth as a company and protecting yourself and your community, that I think a lot of other creators don't necessarily have to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tru, I know you've got some views about kind of the way that people engage with these platforms from either a personal brand building perspective or a corporate perspective. I guess what thoughts do you have around Black communities, how they use these platforms, and also what that growth journey that Brianna referred to looks like or could look like?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I would like to say that anybody that opens a social media account, whether it's a person or a business, they need to understand the level of responsibility that they have. They need to understand that as they begin to start sharing content, that content can have an effect on the end user, good, bad, or indifferent. And because of that, they need to understand and they need to ensure that they are responsibly posting. And when it comes to corporate organizations, it feels very contrived, particularly when we're discussing Black people and the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the stuff around that. It feels like it's something that they're doing just because they feel that they're being forced or eyes are watching them. And, you know, if we cast our minds back to the summer of 2020 and everyone was posting black squares here, black squares there, black squares here, there, and everywhere, oh, you only need to look at those same organizations and think, well, what are they doing now?
Mm.
What have they done since then? Since posting their one dry black square, what have they done since then? And I think it goes back to that responsible posting and that responsible usage of the platform. Don't be inauthentic, whether it's a brand or your personal brand, or, you know, don't be inauthentic. You know, post, be responsible and post what's true to you. If you are for example, a white corporate organization and you don't actually believe that Black Lives Matter, then don't post the black square. Like, no one's going to say, oh, you didn't post a black square. Well, some people might, but you know what I mean? Like, it's better you stay true to yourself rather than be inauthentic and say, oh, I'm going to pledge to make the black community better, and we see your pain and we see your trauma and we recognize all of that, and so we're going to pledge and make it better. It just was very, very wishy-washy to me and for me, and I see it now. I see it now with other corporate organizations, particularly during this month. They've waited a whole entire year and then they start posting you know things around the black community and things around the Black History Month. But excuse me, what have you done in November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September? What have you done? So yes, you're in a post that you're an advocate for the black workers and the black employees and the black community and your black customers. But what are you doing for the 11 other months in the year for your black employees and for your black consumers and for your black audience and your black community? Inauthentic, and it just needs to stop. I would rather you just be truthful and honest and just say, look, this is where we are, we need help, and until we get to a place where we're ready to take action, we're not going to use our social media platforms to try and pacify people and make them feel that we're doing XYZ, because it's all performative. It really is all performative, and that's one of the things that really and truly gripe me, the performative of these corporate organizations who have the money to develop structures and systems to try and combat this beast of racism, but they don't want to because they want to maintain the status quo and they want to. Anyway, we're not going down that road, but you know what I mean. And then when it comes to personal brands, for me, I just believe, going back to the top of the conversation, we have to be responsible. We have to be responsible with our social media platforms, and we have to think about how us sharing and posting things could impact other people. And I know, there's a fine line between educating and informing and, letting people know what's happening. But there was a time where black trauma was being posted for entertainment, for clickbait, for likes. Look, I'm the first one to post this. Look what's happening here. And I'm just like, stop it. Like, it's so frustrating, and and it happens constantly, and not even just talking about putting it in a black box, but even stuff like death. Like, we all cast our mind back to Jamal Edwards when he died. So many stupid, and I haven't got no other words to them but for stupid, irresponsible people posting that Jamal Edwards has died before his mum even had a chance to say it herself, which meant that then she said, oh, I have to come out and say that I've been forced to come out and say that he's died because this stupid, irresponsible people, for what? For likes? To say that I knew first, I was the first one to. It's dead, and I hate it. I hate it. So we must be responsible with our sharing and our content, and think about how this may affect others. And if I was in the other situation, would I want this posted? It's George Floyd was, absolutely, in terms of this conversation, mammoth, and in some ways I do believe that the video had to be shared so people could see the sheer devastation and what we were looking at. But there came a point where I felt, after a while, it just became like entertainment. It just became people were just sharing, and it was just everywhere. And I'm just like, we've seen it now. Like, we can stop and slow down, and then it became this thing where the black trauma was just everywhere, and it just became like entertainment. And I just don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. You can tell me about it, but not show me. And I don't like it. I don't like people sharing black trauma for likes and for clickbait. something that I absolutely detest.
I really love,
So really, go on, sorry, Brianna.
really love what you just said about tell me, don't show me. That's something that, without even realizing it, but when you just said it, I'm like, that's how I try and present the news.
Sorry.
It's all right. That's how I would try and present the news. If there's a story about, there was one a few months ago about a guy in America that was killed by the police, and the details of it were harrowing. And there were people trying to share photos of this guy's body. It's traumatic for the people consuming it. B, it's dehumanizing to the person you are telling that story about. For me, I will always try and find, if I'm going to include a photo at all, a photo of the human being, happy, joyous, with family, to humanize him, or it usually is a him, but them, to humanize them, and also to ensure that the audience consuming it aren't consuming it in some sort of weird true crime fetishy way. They're just reading a news story.
Agreed.
And what are your thoughts about, I guess, one of the things that you mentioned a little bit earlier, Tru, is about brands posting kind of in a way that just isn't responsible. And I think there's a weird dynamic sometimes when it comes to organizations really, from my perspective as well, just looking to evoke a reaction from the Black community. So where we've seen publications that, you know, post the wrong picture of you know, Kwasi Kwarteng or Stormzy or whoever else it is, that you know, there is a theory or school of thought that says that they're just doing it to poke the bear, so to speak, or to get a reaction. Have you got any thoughts around how that can be dealt with, or how we can hold organizations to account in the way that they use social media?
I agree. I absolutely agree in that they know what they're doing, it's deliberate, and they want traction and they want the clickbait. You know, guess what? You know, Black people as a culture, you know, we make things pop. You know, if Black people say we want this to be popping, then it's going to pop. Like, I remember being on Clubhouse and, you know, Black people were like, actually, we are going to make this app pop. And lo and behold, Clubhouse was popping for a season. And it's the same with different industries and different sectors. It's the same with music. It's the same with sports. It's the same with quite a lot of different things. If Black people say, we want this to trend, we want this to pop, it's going to pop. And people know this, corporations know this, news outlets know this, they know this. And I find it extremely hard to believe that they're constantly getting this thing wrong with, you know, doing mistaking photos for different people and stuff. They know exactly what they're doing. I stopped talking about it. I just write them privately. I stopped talking about it on social media. I stopped giving it airtime, because actually me giving you airtime is clickbait. For there used to be some time where I used to screenshot the thing and be like, I don't want to share their link. I'm just going to screenshot it and post it. But then I was like, it's still giving them airtime. I'm not doing that. I'm not giving their story airtime. What I'm going to do is write you and tell you about yourself and tell and leave it at that. But you're not getting a share out of me. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to stop sharing it with our outrage and stop being reactive. And I know it's human emotion, and I know we think, oh, they've got it wrong again, and how dare they? But we need to put it in writing. We need to write them. We need to write the TV channels. We need to write the organisations. We need to demand a response, and we need to tell them it's unacceptable and that they should think about what they're doing before they do it. But I don't think resharing, commenting, building up their algorithms and building up their, you know, their viewership and stats is going to do anyone any good. Because guess what? By us looking at it, we're another number, we're another statistic for them to then pull down sponsorship and advertise editorial space and all of that stuff, because it's numbers, and that's why they do it.
Definitely agree. I think we live in I always say it's the age of outrage, and they know that, and they capitalize on that. And I think I can just speak for myself. I know that when I post something that's negative, that gets interaction. People love to respond to the negative. And I think in their own way, they're creating something negative because they know people will react to it. It's just capitalizing on the age of outrage. I think the only way to change that is to stop being outraged, or to stop being publicly outraged. Do it privately, like you say, take it to the DMs, tell them about themselves, take it to your group chat and have a conversation about it, but just don't share the link. Just don't share the screenshot. Just exactly channel the outrage. It has to be done in a productive way. Like you say, if you click on the clickbait, you're making them money, and that's what they want. They, much like I was saying about knowing how to play the algorithm, they're doing the same thing. They know how to play the audience. Create outrage, it'll get money.
Yeah, absolutely, couldn't agree more. And there's a school of thought as well to say that things like Black Twitter need to be a formal platform where communities have safe spaces that they can engage safely, engage with kind of people that are similar to themselves or experience the world as they do. Is what are your thoughts on that, I guess, segregationalist, if that's a real word, approach to social media? Is that something that you see as beneficial or otherwise? Go to Brianna first, yeah.
Okay. I understand the train of thought. I definitely understand it. I think there's a argument to be made that if you want to just enjoy yourself, you want to just enjoy yourself. You don't want to have to come with the slight bracing of, is this going to come with a side plate of racism? I get it. I don't necessarily think it's helpful in terms of what we're talking about here, social media and marketing. I think you need a broad audience. You don't necessarily just want an audience of one group of people. When you're marketing yourself, when you're creating a brand, when you're building a business, on a personal level, I can see definitely why people want to just go on Twitter, talk to other Black people, why gay people will want to go on and talk to other gay people, and they don't want to have to brace for am I going to be too much for the people that don't like people like me? I get it. But yeah, in terms of kind of marketing and building a brand and building a business, I don't know that I necessarily would use it for the Black Project as my sole platform. If it existed, if there was a Black Twitter, I would be on there to help build my audience, but it wouldn't be my sole platform.
Yeah, just before I go to you on that question, Tru, just to everyone else in the call, please do engage with the chat. Going to be coming to you for questions and answers shortly. So if you do have any questions, post them in the chat or private message me and I'll ask the question on your behalf. Tru, any thoughts in terms of that separation dynamic?
Firstly, disclaimer, I love Black Twitter. I'm one of the Black Twitterers. I'm all over Black Twitter. And the reason why is because there is a need and a desire for me to find commonality and to find people who are experiencing the same challenges, the same injustice, the same distrust, as what I'm going through. And I feel as though when it comes to Black Twitter, I find my tribe, and it's a quote unquote safe space. And also it's very, very entertaining. Like I love when somebody says something wild and Black Twitter's just like, no, we're gonna drag this person, and everyone's just on that person and dragging them, and I love that. I do. I do agree with Brianna. Should it be our only solely platform? Absolutely not. I do believe that there has to be a level of integration with, the wider platform, so we can speak to a wider audience. And if we look about it in the race context and anti-racism, if we're only speaking to Black people about anti-racism, then nothing would ever get changed. If we're only posting content and value around anti-racism in amongst Black spaces, then nothing would ever get changed. we have to post it to the wider world. We have to post it to wider communities to influence and to affect social change. And yes, unlike Black Twitter, that might be met with some opposition, that might be met with some bigots and so forth. But unfortunately for us, we chose this piece of work. We chose to be in this space, and we know that being in this space isn't an easy space to be in. We know that we are trying to change white supremacy, patriarchy from the bottom up, and that is going to and that's centuries of oppression and structural racism and sexism, and because of that, that is going to be met with opposition. And if we don't know that being in this space, then we need to remove ourselves from this space, because just trying to affect change within our own communities, I don't think is great. But I'm going to caveat that and say I do believe we need to have our own spaces within these spaces, because of the commonality and because of that it's nice to have people who have been through the same challenges, but I don't think it should be exclusive and complicitly to that space.
Amazing, thank you. Thank you for everyone that's submitted questions either in advance or in the message. Got a question here in terms of the dynamic with regards to these platforms and content moderators specifically, or not necessarily being from disadvantaged or different diverse communities. What do either of you think can be done to encourage these companies, social media platforms, to invest in dealing with content that is harmful to specific users?
They need to care, and that's the bottom line. Like, Meta do not care, and we know this to be true. And we know, if you was to look at a comparison, if you was to say anything that's anti-Semitic on any of these platforms, you're blocked, you're banned, you're taken down, you're like disowned, you're banished, you're cancelled, and rightly so. You should be. But that same energy is never brought to the conversation about race. You could use the N-word umpteen times, you could be really racist and stuff, and do all these things, and it's not met with the same energy. So for me, it's not about capacity, it's not about them not knowing what to do. For me, it's simply about them caring enough, and they just do not care enough for Black people, which unfortunately is echoes across different industries and different sectors. Black people are just unfortunately not cared about enough for people to want to take action. Hence why the Black Lives Matter movement is still prevalent today.
Yeah, hard agree. I think the only way you can make them care is to hit them in the pocket. I would love for there to be kind of like regular days where Black users just didn't use social media, and they could see how much interaction dropped, how the trending topics dropped off. Even if you did it for multiple days at a time and timed it around big events, like if you did it around like the Super Bowl and no Black people tweeted about the halftime show, could you imagine? Nothing on Twitter, nothing on Facebook, nothing on Instagram, nothing on TikTok. Like, they'd care quite quickly. They would care quickly if we didn't use their platforms, even for 48 hours at a time.
I love that idea, and it kind of is that kind of like that whole Rosa Parks and that let's boycott it and see what happens, because you'll quickly start changing your tune and you'll quickly start turning. I love that point. I think that's a really, really good point.
Likewise, amazing. And I think you're right in terms of galvanizing people's attention around certain dynamics, and it's kind of points people to the need to actually represent communities fairly. Got another question here in terms of the dynamic around social media platforms potentially being an echo chamber. And Tru, you mentioned earlier on in the conversation that you're quite deliberate about curating who you follow, whose notifications you see, and that kind of thing. I guess what are your views in terms of the education piece that you talked about a little bit earlier, in terms of educating people that may have different views or may be ignorant to some of the things that are being said that other communities need to be aware of? Is there a role for education beyond your immediate network or immediate followers?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And every time I do a value-led piece on social media, so not the pretty pictures of me, with my abs or me with my family, but more of a value-led piece of content, I'm always looking at the stats. I'm always looking at where's it gone, how many saves has it got, and how many people have viewed it. And I'm always thinking, and it breaks it down to say the followers or the non-followers, because I want to see who's viewing the content. I want to see how many people have seen it and how many lives it could potentially affect. And I think it really is incumbent upon all of us who use social media as a value-led platform to offer value, to understand our metrics and to understand, is it being seen our beyond our following. And when we're looking at social media, for a large part, people follow you for different reasons. So some might follow me because they like to see, they like to pay for my abs, and that's absolutely fine, or the non-existent ones. Some might follow me because they like the stuff that I do around my family and stuff. Some might follow me because they like the value that I offer in terms of them building their brands and stuff. And then some might follow me because I have quite a loose mouth and I'm always talking about, particularly around Black lives and anti-racism. And different people have different reasons why they follow people. And it's about understanding your audience, and it's about understanding, the reasons why they follow you, and it's about giving them the content that they're following you for. And if you don't, then then you would lose your followers and you would lose your, I guess, your credibility. And TikTok is a prime example. I know people who have done a viral video on TikTok, got many followers, and then they started to post different things, and the followers are like, "This isn't what I followed you for," and they start to lose their followers dramatically because it's not the content that these guys signed up for or that you promised them. So you've got to understand your audience, and you've got to understand what they're coming to your platforms for, and then you've got to try and serve them the best way that you can.
Absolutely. We're just going to launch a quick poll to understand how everybody feels about this webinar, and also to guide some of what we do with future webinars. Hopefully the webinar has been beneficial so far. Brianna, did you have anything to reflect on that last point around the potential for social media to sometimes be an echo chamber? I guess specifically with your platform, in terms of that whole dynamic between tell me, don't show me.
I think it can feel like an echo chamber at times. It definitely can. I think I'm quite lucky with the platform that I've curated, that I actually get feedback from people to say, they're using what I'm putting out in schools, in their lessons, in conversation with students. I've had people say that they've spoken to family members that were either overtly right-wing or unconsciously carrying bias, and they've used what I've put out to kind of have conversations, and they've changed minds, and that helps break it. So I really, if you're a user of social media and you're using it for that value, 100% reach out to the people that are creating that content and tell them that they're not speaking to an echo chamber. They're not speaking to the same people every single time. They're not getting just their followers. It is spreading outside of that, because it can be kind of deflating almost, I think, as well. Being in the echo chamber, it can kind of feel like, am I making a difference? Am I actually getting anything out of this? Or are other people getting anything out of this? Am I doing this for a reason? Is there a purpose to this? And I do think, yes, even if you feel like you're in an echo chamber, you're not. One person that you speak to don't keep that to themselves. And then when you've got an audience of 100, those 100 people, even if 20 of them take what you've said and talk to one other person, what you're perceiving as an echo chamber is so much larger than that. I personally have curated the following list for the Black Project. So what I see is what I want to see. However, I don't say who can follow the platform, and that's kind of almost more important than who I'm following. Anyone can follow it, and there's people on that list that when I've clicked on their accounts and I've seen what they're posting, I'm thinking, why are you here? Like your content is not giving necessarily what I would perceive as open-minded, and yet I've never had any negative comments from you. I've never had any DMs that are negative from you. So clearly something on here made you as a person that didn't publicly share any interest in Black lives, in anti-racism, in is it anti-homophobia? I don't know, like pro-LGBT. You haven't publicly given any indication that you care about these issues, and yet here you are. So I think, yeah, even if you curate an echo chamber for yourself so that your feed is nice and happy and joyous, you're not stopping anyone from following you. And that's kind of more important when you're a value-led platform.
Amazing. Yeah, I completely agree. So we're coming towards the end of this session, also this series. One of the things we've been doing with all of the other webinars is really encouraging people to think about what a positive future could look like. So in relation to social media, in relation to how content creators engage, how the general public engages, and also the platforms themselves, what are some of the things that you would hope to see on the horizon for the way that social media and marketing engages with Black communities? Go to you first, Tru.
So there's a few things that I would like to see. So the first thing that I would like to see is people being a bit more responsible with their social media channels. I mean, it's so easy to open a channel. I think there needs to be more regulation around who opens a channel, and removing some of the like I do believe that we should have you should have to have an ID for every social media channel that you open, whether it's a photograph ID or license or passport or something. So removes the need of having trolls and having all these things that causes such harm, and it would allow people to be more accountable, and it would allow people to be more responsible. And there's little practical things that I think the social media platforms could do themselves. I think there should be a pop-up button to say, do you really want to post this kind of thing on every single post? Because even if that second thought, you go back and read it and you're like, actually, maybe I shouldn't, or actually this is a bit traumatic, maybe I shouldn't post this. But just a general kind of, is this something that you want to do type of thing? And also I just think that moving forward, I think as consumers, I think we have a role to play as well, and we should be absolutely thinking about how we are using our platforms, and are we using them responsibly, and are we trying to educate, or are we trying to just share carelessly? And I think it's really, really important that we understand that, and also understand why we're on the platform as well. So it's not just all about promotion and pushing out, but also about the consumption. What are you consuming? Are you liking the content that you're consuming? Are you making the networks and the relationships? It's really understanding the reasons as to why you're on the platform. But I definitely would like to see more Black creators on the platform, and more Black creators on the platform being respected and being paid for what they're doing. I know this is opening another different conversation, and one that we haven't touched on, but I do believe that Black creators are more likely to be disrespected and not paid what they're worth, and their work being copied and taken and appropriated in many different ways. So they're my final thoughts on it.
Amazing. Thank you, Brianna.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to echo everything that you just said, Tru, but basically everything that you just said, Tru. Yeah, I think Rio Ferdinand's just launched his platform called We Are 8, and that has the bare bones of being something that I think could be really powerful. It's a creator first platform. It is focused around kind of climate justice, like they're a carbon neutral company. Essentially, they're just a company that cares about people and planet. And I think currently it's very much like Facebook was in its early days, where you can kind of only interact with people within your own friendship circle. I think if they found a way to expand that infrastructure into being a more social platform, that kind of thing is exactly what I would like social media to be. In the meantime, I think platforms like Meta, I mean, for the last 2 years, if you've mentioned COVID-19 at any point in your posts, instantly they recognize it and instantly they put a warning underneath it. You don't have to do anything other than type the words COVID-19. I would like to see them utilize that kind of skill that they've got to like fish out racism, fish out anti-Semitism, fish out homophobia. It shouldn't necessarily be on the user to have to be facing that and then reporting it. They clearly have the software, they clearly have the ability to find these terms and make you aware that they're there or do something about it. So do something about it. I would love that. I think that would make it a much more user-friendly experience. I think people like me, who, like I've said at the beginning, didn't feel comfortable at all having my face on this platform, would then feel more comfortable combining a personal and professional brand. Yeah, I think that's kind of my main things. And I would love to see users more interacting with the positive. I think I see that a lot on my platform. I get quite frustrated that people really love to interact with the negativity around Black lives, and they love to interact with the violence and the death and the trauma. They don't always love to interact with the joy and the talent and the skill and the beauty. And I think until as a people we're acknowledged that we are multifaceted, I think we're going to kind of feel like we're existing in an echo chamber where we're banging our heads and begging people to care about anything other than the negative. So I would love that to be the thing that users kind of take away and go, can I make sure I'm engaging in something other than just trauma, something that isn't just performative, just actively engage in Black life.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Thank you once again for engaging. Thank you for everybody that's managed to log on, for contributing in the chat. This is, as I said, the end of this Black Future series. We do have more webinars upcoming for the next couple of months and into the new year. So do subscribe to our newsletter. Keep engaging with us on social media, everywhere at The Equal Group, www.theequalgroup.com. Finally, Tru, Brianna, where can people find you if they want to engage? Go to you first, Tru. Oh, you put it in the chat.
Yeah, I'll just put mine in the chat.
Brianna?
I'll just drop it in the chat as well, but it's the Black Dot Project on Instagram, and the website is theblackproject.net, and there's all the contact details on both for like emails and stuff. So yeah.
Amazing. So recording of this session will be available within the next week. Thank you all once again. Really wishing you a great rest of the day. Do continue to engage and hopefully speak soon. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.